Now tomorrow, that's Thursday, September the 19th, will be the last day of the campaigning ahead of next Saturday's governorship election in Edo State. And that's according to the provisions of the electoral law. All the participating political parties and their governorship tickets are at the moment trying to make the most of the remaining window for campaigns. Just last week, the ruling People's Democratic Party in Edo State declined to submit to the terms of a peace accord arranged for all parties by the National Peace Committee. And with Governor Godwin Obaseki declaring a do-or-die situation over the impending election, what else can be expected from the major players? Well, Mark Amaza is a senior communications officer at election monitoring group Yaga Africa. He joins us now to discuss the general preparations for the election in Edo State, how a peaceful and hitch-free electoral process can be achieved, and the latest on the spot assessment report of situations in Edo State. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newsday.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Yaga's assessment reports are crucial for election transparency. What specific challenges has Yaga identified in Edo State that could potentially compromise the integrity of the election?
Well, you started hinting at one of them, which is incendiary comments by political candidates and parties, and the personal attacks and name bashing, which increases a tense atmosphere within the state. And we've noticed that particularly between the PDP and the APC. And that creates a tense environment that can lead to the breakdown of law and order. There's also been an uptick in violence in the state, which, you know, as we lead with days to the elections, if that is not checked, it's going to likely also lead to violence in the state, either during the election or immediately after the election. So those two are very, very significant, are the most significant challenges we see. The other challenge is that of apathy, where there's a lot of apathy by among the citizens with regards to the elections, which is also not helped by the rather low level of awareness by INEC and also by the National Orientation Agency across the states. They have not done enough in terms of awareness, in terms of convincing people, citizens, to turn out and vote on Saturday. So yes, those factors are what we see that are likely going to be could make the elections challenging.
I wanted to ask a key finding from the Yagi Africa Watching the Vote report. The initiative has highlighted that the role of influential figures, for example, Mr. Oshomole and Governor Obaseki, in shaping the political landscape of the state. I want to know, how significant do you believe influencers such as those will be in determining the outcome of the election? What impact would it have on political rivalry in a broader sense even?
It's going to have a very significant impact, even though none of these two persons you have mentioned are running the elections. One is the immediate past governor and one is the outgoing governor. The election has become a sort of proxy battle between them. And their comments, and they both have candidates who they have rooting for, who they have backed in their respective parties. And so those candidates it has become a sort of proxy battle between the two. And then the comments they make back and forth, how they are both doing their best or doing all they can to see that their candidates emerge triumphant or victorious, has a huge role to play. The other factor that you didn't mention is also the role of the traditional institution. For example, the Oba of Benin. While as a traditional ruler, he cannot be partisan, and yet there's a lot of invocation of his name and authority by different candidates, directly and indirectly, or putting out various kinds of news around who he is backing and who he's not backing, to see how they could leverage the influence he holds in the state to win. So those are going to be a huge definer of the elections as well.
Touched on in terms of some of the concerns that you have, voter apathy potentially happening in a few days. But I'd also like to ask you about what you think about inclusion when it comes to participation of marginalized groups like women, youth, and persons with disabilities in the Edo election. Are you impressed with the level of inclusion that you're seeing there?
Well, there's some what we can measure from now in terms of inclusion is going to be from the candidates we are seeing in the election. And what we are seeing, there's no female governorship candidates among the 18, and there's only one female running mate in the election. When it comes to the campaigning, all groups are doing their best to see how young people, women, and persons with disability are also involved. But ultimately, it's not just for them to be voters. They also need to be involved as candidates, as persons working with the candidates, and so on. We'll wait till the election to see how that reflects in the final voting, whether these groups we've mentioned are going to turn out in large numbers and vote, and see how. But it's really important that beyond just their participation as voters, we also see them as being persons who are capable of being voted for.
And a question I have is the security obviously has been identified as a major concern with reports of cultist activities, kidnappings, firearm proliferation in some of the LGAs. What actions should be prioritized by security agencies to ensure a safe and election process? And what can be done to mitigate the potential violence?
That's a very, very important question, because this election will be a significant test for security agencies in terms of measuring their impartiality, to ensure that they play the role of ensuring a safe voting environment and are not tilting to one side or the other. That's very, very important. And like you mentioned, there's that, I mentioned earlier too, that optic of violence is really important for the security agencies, particularly the police, which is the lead security agency in elections, and then the other security agencies that support it, to put in place an environment where persons, no matter non-state actors, are not given the room to wreak violence or wreak havoc, to intimidate voters, to participate in violence. And it's critical, because once an impression of partiality, it begins to call the credibility of the elections into question. And you mentioned earlier on, for example, around one party not signing on to the peace accord, that their protest was basically that their members, they don't believe they have given a fair hearing because their members have been arrested by the police. Those kind of situations, while the police need to look into their claims, it's also important that as we head into elections in this final 2-3 days, which will, when things get to a fever pitch, that we have an environment where no party is seen or its supporters are seen to be above the law, are seen to take the law into their own hands. And on that election day, that voters feel secure to come out and cast their vote is really, really important.
You've talked about inclusion, security, and even the candidates to an extent. But now I'd like to talk to you or ask you about how you evaluate INEC's preparedness for this election, especially when we consider the criticisms that have preceded this election, especially with the last election that we just had. How prepared would you say INEC is?
So far, and I emphasize the word so far, INEC has been putting in place the right things. We've seen that from when they opened the voter register in the state, and Ondo State, which is going to election in November. The collection of voters' cards, PVCs in Edo State, which closed on the 8th of September. We have seen how we've also tracked the distribution of non-sensitive materials so far to the various local governments, and we believe that so far up to this point we have been seeing they've been doing the right things. We hope that it continues that way all the way to the election day, when and the distribution of sensitive materials, to deployment of personnel, to ensuring that personnel are well trained and abide by the guidelines and the laws guiding elections in Nigeria. So, on Saturday is when rubber will meet the road and we'll see the final outcome. But if we look at what they have done so far, we can see that they have put in place all the things that they need to get done, from training personnel to ensuring voters have access to collect their PVCs, to distribution of non-sensitive materials. But then we'll wait till Saturday to get the final verdict.
And also there have been some allegations of voter inducement and reports of inter-party, intra-party conflicts, especially amongst APC, PDP, LP. What more needs to be done to maintain a fair and transparent electoral process?
Yes, you're right. We have noted this voter inducement in our pre-election observation reports, where parties are offering citizens monies in the low thousands to get them to vote for them on election day. And it's rather unfortunate because if for candidates to be inducing voters to vote for them, it says one of two things: either that their promises they don't have any cogent promises to make to the electorate, or that the promises that they have made before have not been fulfilled, and they now see that the only way they can secure their votes is to purchase them. And it's really it's not what a democracy should be. So we know it's when it comes down on election day, it's really important for INEC and security bodies to ensure that persons who are seen to be purchasing votes are arrested and prosecuted, because vote buying is a crime under our electoral laws. It's not just a moral issue, it's a legal and a criminal issue. And it's important that those who engage in it are apprehended and are prosecuted according to the law, to send a very strong message to others that is not allowed.
All right, Maki, this is like a bit of a follow-up from your response regarding INEC's preparation, but what measures are in place to ensure the integrity of results transmission from polling units to collation centers? And we all know how vulnerable this process is when it comes to it being susceptible to potential manipulation.
Yeah, so that's a very important question. The Electoral Act, allows for the electronic transmission of results from polling units, and we expect that INEC will adhere to that. Will transmit the results from polling units to the INEC result viewing portal. Even if it's not mandated by law, it plays a very critical role in ensuring accountability, where citizens can be able to see the results and track the process. It improves their confidence in the process, and when the results are out, they can have confidence that these results are a true reflection of how the people voted, which will inspire people to turn out to vote in subsequent elections. And for us at YAG Africa, it's one of the things we are looking at. We're looking at seeing how the election results are managed from polling units by observers, from polling unit to collation center. We're going to be also observing how it's the adherence to laws and guidelines in terms of transmission, for example, to the INEC result viewing portal. That election result management process, all of it is one of the things we're going to be watching to ensure that it's done properly. And of course, wherever we see that things what's being done is not going in accordance to the expectation, or as stipulated in the law and the INEC guidelines, we're definitely going to sound the alarm.
Mark, there's over 2.6 million registered voters. Voter education is obviously crucial. There are reports that show voter education efforts by INEC and CSOs are limited because how can civil society, they can't really get to certain areas. So how could civil society, media, electoral bodies expand these efforts in the critical days leading up to the election, particularly with marginalized communities?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and yes, we do not expect INEC and the NOA, for example, to do that all by themselves, even though we are missing out a critical component of voter education, which is political parties. Whenever we talk about voter education, we leave out political parties, and they're the biggest beneficiary of voter turnout. It's unfortunate that they do not seem to prioritize voter education when approaching elections. But to the heart of your question, how can civil society and the media play a role? We've seen that already in Edo State. For example, YAG Africa has been running an Election 101 in 5 series on radio stations in Edo State for the past few weeks, where we explain an aspect of elections to citizens in 5 minutes or less. And this is very, very important, because the more citizens are informed on how elections operate, or how the rules guiding them, the more they better understand it, the more likely they are to turn out and participate. We've also been engaging with CSOs, other CSOs that are on ground in Edo State, and the media. We have had a palace where we had conversation around what they can do to get more students to turn out and vote, and of course also understand our election observation methodology. We've also been having jingles and videos play on media stations, radio and TV stations in the state that encourages citizens to turn out and vote. And we're not the only ones doing this. There are other civil society organizations doing the states that are doing this, whether they are having boots on the ground, going to the remote areas, you mentioned the rural communities, using the media, using social media, electronic, digital media to reach citizens and voters in the state to turn out and vote. And there's always a lot more that we can do in this regard. So yes, we'll continue to do that. The good thing about voter education is that it's not unlike campaigning. You're not bad, you're not time bound to end at a certain time. So we'll continue doing that up to the day of the election.
Amaza, this has been a very insightful discussion. We'd like to thank you for joining us here on Newsday, and we look forward to what you have to tell us when the election kicks off. Thank you.